Welcome back for a new review, specifically a retro review this time. This is going to be my first console review in quite some time, and it's for some I just received in the mail the other day. Since I've been using the Wii overall for most of my stuff, but finally got back in my collection a Nintendo Gamecube. Now this is probably one of the most unique game consoles that ever was made by Nintendo. It was not the most successful, but it was came in third place for the sixth console generation. And of course my beautiful Dreamcast came in last, which sucks, but with that said, one thing like the Dreamcast can say, the GameCube, I think as time has gone on, more people have come to actually appreciate the GameCube for what it was, and its unique style and design. Of Nintendo consoles, it definitely was the last, I think, reasonably a bit more powerful console. Because it was pretty much on par with most others. Now, the only issue with the GameCube was, of course, the mini disc, because it could only hold about a third of the data that a normal CD could hold. Still, it could hold a lot more than obviously the N64 cartridges had real limitations. But there wasn't a lot of third-party games on this console. Though there was some, what I think people mostly remember the GameCube for was the exclusives, much like you could say for the Super Nintendo. The N64 has quite a few memorable exclusives, but in my opinion, I think quality titles, actually, in my opinion anyways, the GameCube is better than the N64 for me. I would probably put the the GameCube would probably be in like maybe third place for me of Nintendo consoles. As I said, definitely one thing I think it's quite memorable about the GameCube is just the actual cube design. The perfect cube. Of course, there you have your vents. Luckily, it had fan vents on both sides to help keep the console cooler. That definitely helps keep from overheating, unlike other consoles. Besides that, one of the other things, like the N64, would have, of course, 4 controller ports, which is, I think, a good thing for many games, specifically like the Mario Party games and things of that nature. Definitely was perfect. You had your standard, like anything at the time, your standard memory cards. How I miss the era of memory cards, because you didn't have to worry about hard drive crashing or anything. Well, the other unique things about the GameCube was the fact it actually had a handle on it. I mean, yeah, that makes it easy to move, but the question is, what's the point of having a handle when you still have all the other attachments separate? Your AV cables, your power cord, and your controllers. But it was definitely very unique. It had 3 buttons, as you can see on the top. You had your power button, you had your reset button, which, yeah, back one of the last consoles to actually have a reset button. Then your normal open button. How unique it was with the whole mini disc thing. But I actually think the GameCube is one of the better consoles, at least design aspect wise. It is a very distinctive console. You're not going to mistake for any other game console to come out. It's one thing I'll give to Nintendo. For the most part, a lot of their consoles are pretty memorable just for the unique designs, in my opinion. But in my view, GameCube is probably easily one of the most distinctive designs of all time. And the other cool thing about the console was the fact underneath you could take these things off, these attachments, take it off and stuff, and the air part, you could plug in a device to the bottom, and which would allow you to play Game Boy Advance games. So you would have the attachment like down here, and be able to play Game Boy Advance. That is quite unique. A thing now, the Game Boy Advance attachment costs just as much as the console itself. But if you want the special boot disc, which you need to play it, on average, that attachment alone goes for 2 to 3 times the price of an actual GameCube console. And if you're at all interested about getting into GameCube collecting or get a console and stuff, I got this one in pretty much mint condition, a very well taken care of console. Keep in mind, it didn't come with any controllers, just the basic cords. I already had GameCube controller though. And you can get this easily for around like $50 or so at GameCube. So it's not extremely expensive. That is definitely good if you're interested in collecting for the GameCube. It is definitely very affordable. Now, the game prices of the game specifically for the GameCube can very much vary from title to title. Some are extremely affordable, very easy to get hold of. I mean, there are a decent amount of games you can get for probably $20 or less. Then there's the more coveted exclusive titles that definitely cost more than that. Games that come to mind. But first, also, I want to say one of the things I like about the GameCube, I'm not as big a fan as some people, but in my opinion, still, I do like the GameCube controller design. Overall, I think it's actually a pretty solid design. I think the bottom joystick is actually not bad. The top joystick is okay. I like the C joystick still. Now, the button design and layout is different, but also it's weird the fact you only have 3 back buttons. Now, I will say about these buttons, at least it has a satisfying feel to it when you press them in. Not so much the top one, but I do like the satisfying feel of it. Also, in my opinion, the D-pad isn't necessarily the greatest, but the D-pad's not too bad. But if you want to play a lot of fine games, you will have to use the D-pad. It's just too bad the D-pad was a little better built. But still, the joysticks are pretty solid. And overall, it's a decent controller. It's one of the more, I think, more comfortable overall, though, controllers to feel in your hands. If you don't have giant hands like myself, GameCube controller is going to feel a lot better, in my opinion. The grip is pretty solid. But what's really important and key are just some of the titles for the GameCube. Now, games that are actually exclusives that are reasonably affordable, you have games like Resident Evil 0, which in my opinion is one of the most underrated Resident Evil games, and it deserves a lot more credit and a lot more respect than it gets. It's unfortunate. As an example, I was able to get this in very good condition, under $10 for Resident Evil 0. Now, you will always get that lucky. Keep in mind also, though, this is the player's choice version, which is another reason it was a little bit cheaper. But you can get this game of exclusive titles. This is one of the cheapest by far. Also, of stuff, it has, some great RPGs. In my opinion, a great RPG that I still enjoyed to this day that was exclusively originally, that being Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. A Final Fantasy game I personally recommend, though. It's a game, unfortunately, that is designed more for local co-op in mind, since you can do up to a party of 4 people can play together, which makes it very unique and distinctive from any other Final Fantasy game that was released. So that does help give it its own signature, plus its own unique signature art style compared to other Square games of the time period. Then you had some special promotional type collection stuff that was released. To me, and this is a game that when I got it was pretty affordable, not so much now, but still really cool having this promotional disc, which would include the original classic Legend of Zelda, Legend of Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask, all included. Now, some people say the Majora's Mask on this is not the greatest. I've never played the N64 Majora's Mask. This was my introduction to Majora's Mask game. But still, it is quite unique in my opinion. And yeah, it's still very unique to this day. The whole mini disc thing is still kind of interesting and unique. It's definitely a novelty type of, I guess you could say, thing with the mini disc, but occasionally I do like novelty act type things, and that does help give the distinctive design and feel to the GameCube over many other consoles. Also, in my opinion, one of the best Star Wars games of all time, which was a console exclusive. And of course, that being Star Wars Rogue Leader, Rogue Squadron 2, in my opinion, the best of the Rogue Squadron series. Definitely, if you're a fan of the original classic Star Wars films, you're definitely going to love Rogue Leader. This was the very first GameCube game I ever played, was Rogue Leader. This was the first also GameCube game I ever owned. So definitely this game holds a definite nostalgia factor for me personally. Now if you're a fighting game fan like myself, then of course I'm sure a lot of people out there picked up the GameCube version of Soulcalibur 2, which of course had Link from The Legend of Zelda. And I can think of a more perfect character as an exclusive for the GameCube port of the console. While you had Heihachi Mishima for PS2, and you had Spawn. And then in more recent years, you had, in the 7th console generation, a online edition released on 360 and PS3, which included both Spawn and Heihachi, but of course minus Link, because of it being, obviously, a major face for Nintendo. Nintendo would never allow that to happen. To allow anything on the original. You can't beat Soulcalibur 2. It's definitely probably the best fighting game. Last of a few games before I end this little brief retrospective / review. You hear music in the background for it. For me personally, it is, in my view, the most distinctive, or pretty much about the most distinctive Pokemon game ever made. Pokemon Colosseum, which for me is my probably number 2 favorite Pokemon game of all time. Pokemon Colosseum has really held on. It was the first true, full 3D true Pokemon game where you could move about world. Not massive like more modern day Pokemon games, but it was the first leap forward, really, for a 3D, more towards, RPG type feel, though you could only capture up to a certain amount of Pokemon. One thing I will say, the difficulty curve on this game was pretty decent, plus also the special battles you had to go through in order to get certain stuff in the game. I appreciate that for all the extra content in order to give you more playtime. And I actually appreciate the difficulty being much higher than the average Pokemon game. I guess if you want to sort of consider it in a way, I guess some people might call it the Dark Souls of Pokemon games, though Colosseum predates Demon Souls by quite a few years. Or, anyways, in my opinion, it is a great game, great soundtrack, and it is a game that definitely deserves more love than it gets. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the original box, or rather, booklet. And one thing I found interesting about these cases were the fact it actually had a holder for the memory cards, just like the PS2, which is quite interesting. I just found that very unique. But with that said, this was a brief, just little talk review on the Nintendo GameCube. Now leave a comment below, tell me what are some of your personal favorite GameCube games of all time. What do you look back most fondly of the Nintendo GameCube, if you ever owned one or just played it? Like, what was your favorite game? What genre did you enjoy? The GameCube was definitely a good console, specifically for, believe it or not, things like survival horror. With Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil Remake, Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4. Excuse me. But with that said, I'll see y'all next time. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel. And have a safe 2021. See you next time.